Hello and welcome back to the Consistory of the Coelc YouTube channel. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Jake Zabel of the St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church, located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. Today we're going to be continuing my series here on lay women in the church, going through my little pink book over here about the role of female laity in the church. And today we're going to be looking at the topic of female lay distributors or lay assistants. Now, I've explained in previous videos how this book was written between my transition from the Lutheran Church of Australia to the Australian Evangelical Lutheran Church. At that point in time, my biggest issue with this whole practice was women doing it. So I was moving from a church that had women laity serving Holy Communion through to a more conservative synod that had only male laity doing it. Now, if you've watched this channel and you've read my other book on should we have lay distributors, you would know that we in the coelc do not practice lay distribution. We do not support the whole lay ministry movement. So in general, it doesn't really matter if it's a man or a woman doing it. In the coelc, we wouldn't have anyone serving as a lay distributor of Holy Communion. Now, there is a difference between lay distributor and lay assistant, and the reason I made this distinction is a lay distributor is someone who will actually distribute the body and blood through the bread and the wine by actually handing it over to the communicants and either saying or not saying take and eat and take and drink. The lay assistant, however, is essentially someone that works as an extra pair of hands. So they might hold a tray of individual cups, but they wouldn't actually give it to the communicants, and they would never tell the communicants to take and drink. Or maybe they might carry the plate around so that the pastor didn't have to carry it. Something like that. So those are more lay assistants. My rule of thumb is very simple. If the job of the lay assistant could be done by a table, then they're not distributing, and therefore it would be a permissible practice. I might discourage said practice because it might create confusion in the church, but it would be a permissible practice. It's when they start actually giving out the bread and the wine, that's when it becomes an issue. Now, with all that said, however, when I wrote this book, that was years before I had even really looked into the whole topic of male lay distribution, and at this point in time I was just addressing the issue of women in the church. And there are church bodies out there like the Missouri Synod and the Lutheran Church of Australia that allow women to do these roles. Now, as I said, in the coelc we would have neither lay man nor lay woman do them, but in other church bodies like the Wells and that, they would restrict it to just lay men and they would not allow lay women. So this book is really more just addressing the topic of, if you were going to have lay distributors, would it be permissible to have a woman do it? And as you can probably guess, the whole argument from the previous videos is that no, this would be a position of exercising authority in the church, especially if the layperson were to say the actual words of Christ, take and eat, take and drink. Now, if they didn't do that, I do believe it would still be an authoritative position. As we've mentioned before, in the Lutheran Church of Australia's statement of the role of women in the church, they said, based on 1 Corinthians 14 and 1 Timothy 2, that women are not to have any authoritative leadership or independent roles within the church. So they shouldn't be up the front there. And of course the LCA's argument is always, oh, well, since they're assisting the pastor, it's not an authoritative position. But as we've discussed in previous videos, there is this over-under principle of authority. Just because you are under somebody's authority does not mean you're not over somebody else. A supervisor might be under the boss, but he would still be over the other workers. Any lay person who's distributing may be under the pastor's authority, but they're still exercising authority over the rest of the laity. So therefore, this is not a position for a woman. Now the question would be, what about lay assistance though? See, lay distribution, where the woman actually has to give out the bread and give out the wine, that's an authoritative position. It's generally the reason why we in the coelc don't allow even lay men to do it, because it is an authoritative position. by giving the bread or giving the wine. You are permitting someone to come to the communion table. And that is a responsibility that is reserved for the office of the ministry. It is definitely an authoritative position. However, as we did say at the start of this video, the coelc would permit the use of male lay assistants. And a lay assistant, as I said, is not someone that actually distributes. They just serve as an extra pair of hands. They may be in a circumstance where the pastor wishes to give out bread and wine at the same time. Maybe the lay person carries the bread, and then the pastor takes the bread off the plate, distributes it, and then takes the cup and distributes it. Or maybe the lay person is going around with a tray of individual cups and allowing the lay people to take the cups, and then the pastor will come along and actually tell them to drink it. So those positions are permissible for a man. Would they be permissible for a woman? And this is something that we're really going to get into later when we discuss the topic of female ushers. And that is whether it's forbidden or whether it should be discouraged. Now, since it's not necessarily an authoritative position, that's why we are allowing a layperson in the coelc to do this anyway. If it's not an authoritative position, is there anything wrong with the woman doing it? If she's not exercising authority, she's not leading, then what's wrong with her doing it? And I think there are really two principles of this. One is the fact that men are meant to step up and provide and care for women. And especially in the church then, if there are men available, why not let the men do it? As for the women though, the other reason is that Scripture is clear in 2 Timothy there that the role of women in the church is to learn in all quietness and submission. And so the actual God-given role for women in the church is to sit in the pew and learn. It's not their job to get up and do stuff during the service. That's the job of the pastor, and if the pastor needs some extra assistance, and that's in the case of things like a lay assistant carrying the plate around, things that basically serve as an extra pair of hands, something that would be permissible for a lay person to do, it's not the place for a woman. Not necessarily because a woman couldn't do it, not because there's any necessary prohibition on a woman doing this, but more on the fact that that's just not her role in church. God has given her a God-pleasing role to sit and to learn. Therefore, if there is some role that requires a man to get up and help out, it should be done by the man, because the woman has been left to sit and to learn. She shouldn't be required to have to get up. And so, lay distribution, definitely, women should not be doing it. And in the coelc we'd argue that if it's an authoritative position like that, even the lay men shouldn't be doing it. As for lay assistants, those who basically could be replaced with a table if you really need, women could possibly do that hypothetically, but I think it would violate the scriptural principle that says that their job is to sit down and to listen. And so that wraps up our video on women lay distributors and women lay assistants. In our next videos, because I'm planning to do this over a couple videos, we're going to be looking at the topic of women voting, or just the topic of women's suffrage. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.